A friend in town told me she was going to be getting rid of this old vanity and asked if I'd be interested in having a go at fixing it up. Obviously. It's an Art Deco era waterfall style piece, but beyond that, I have no idea what is hiding under this old paint. There could be some gorgeous wood grain waiting to be revealed, or it could be a full repaint situation. Either way, in for a penny, in for a pound. Let's see what we find. This vanity is from the Art Deco era of the 1930s and 40s. It would have originally come with a large round mirror attached to the back and a small stool so that you could sit and fix your hair and makeup and get ready for the day. You'll sometimes hear these pieces called wedding furniture because entire matching suites like this were really popular gifts for newlyweds setting up their first homes, mostly because they were built with budget in mind. The smooth, rounded edges and curved fronts are the signature of this waterfall design. And while it's wearing these brushed nickel knobs right now, it likely would have originally had Bakelite handles, the early form of plastic that was all the rage at the time. This duck egg green-blue paint is a really pretty color and looks like it was applied nice and neatly, but since it's been sitting out in the shed or garage, it's gotten dirty and marked up and is definitely in need of another refresh. Usually furniture gets painted to either hide wear and tear, some serious damage, or just change the style, so I'm fully prepared for anything I find. I can see that there is wood veneer on the drawer fronts and the top with a few minor looking chips in it, so there's a good chance that there's a fancier grain pattern hiding underneath, but I need to get started removing this paint to find out. First, I'm going to get the drawers out and the knobs off. Look at that. The drawers all have finger pulls on them, which means it didn't originally have any hardware and you're meant to pull the drawers open by these handles. Interesting. There's also an interesting little habitat happening here. I'll get that with the vacuum, but these all look in good working condition, even though I'd prefer that they weren't all fully painted. And the runners that they slide on look like they're good too. Since I don't know what I'm dealing with yet, I'm going to start with a chemical stripper on the top instead of trying to remove anything with my carbide scraper or sander, which could cause more damage if the wood isn't in the greatest condition. This GreenEZ is a soy-based stripper that's easy to use, has no harsh fumes, and is biodegradable. I should have shaken up this jug because it's been sitting for a while. It's supposed to be a nice thick gel consistency, not this runny. Whoops. The first time I used this stuff a few years ago, I absolutely hated it, but since giving it a few more tries, it's actually become my favorite stripper. It does take a little longer than the super toxic hardware store strippers. You need to leave it on the surface for at least an hour or two, but I found that it often does a much better job at breaking up paints for me. It's only been about an hour, but this looks like it's more than ready to go. I've got a flexible putty knife to start scraping carefully so that I don't gouge the soft wood underneath, and an old paint can to collect all the goop in. Yeah, that is so satisfying. It looks like mahogany. This finishing cleaner is designed to work along with the stripper just to help wipe away any remaining dissolved paint and that kind of oily residue that's left behind from the stripping gel. It also works as just a great cleaner for surface prep before painting or refinishing, even if you're not stripping. I haven't scraped off the drawer fronts yet, but now that I can see how beautiful the wood on this top is, I'm thinking maybe I can do a wood paint combo. Leave the top and hopefully the drawer fronts as wood and then paint the side panels and the trim pieces. A lot of the original finish is still on here. You can clearly see all the scratches and wear marks, which is probably the reason for the paint in the first place. But my carbide scraper should cut through this pretty fast and get us back to bare wood. I just need to be super careful going over this curved edge so I don't accidentally gouge it. I'm going to clean up my mess here and get as many of the big cobwebs as I can while I'm at it. And then I think I'm just going to wash off the rest of the desk that I'm planning on repainting so there are no contaminants that might interfere with that. Let's see what these drawer fronts look like. That is more mahogany. I think the handles are maple with a super dark, almost opaque stain on them to go with the mahogany. Once I get these fronts cleaned off, I'm going to fill up a syringe with some wood glue so that I can get up under all of the loose spots of veneer and then clamp everything down to dry. This walnut wood filler is the closest color match I've got, so I'm going to use that to close up the knob holes. And I'm going to put a little bit of painter's tape around them so that I don't smear any more filler than I need to into the bare wood grain around them, because that might make them even more noticeable and harder to camouflage later on. I also need to glue this little chip that I accidentally took out of the top back down and fill in a few more missing chunks along this back edge while I'm at it. Okay, all of the wood glue and filler has had overnight to fully dry, so now I can remove these clamps. I should have wrapped these boards in some painter's tape before I used them for this so they didn't stick to the wood glue. Luckily, it doesn't look like I'm going to tear any chunks of veneer off with them. That would have sucked. I'm going to use some 180 grit now on my small sander to remove the rest of the dark finish on here and smooth out the filler and hopefully not grind away too much of the really thin veneer layer and expose the board underneath. Hand sanding would probably be the safest, but I don't have the patience for that today, so I'm just going to cross my fingers and hope for the best. I'm also going to give the painted sides and drawer interiors a quick once over to smooth them out. Ideally, I'd love to have drawers that weren't painted inside, but since that's what I've got to work with, and removing all the old paint would mean completely deconstructing each drawer and then trying to reassemble them without creating new issues. So instead, I'm just going to sand them smooth and repaint them when I do the rest of the piece. Same deal with the top, slow and steady with my 180 grit to remove the remaining finish and smooth out a few scratches without removing too much of the wood layer to cause damage. To go over the curved edge on the front, I'm going to switch out to a foam sanding pad, again, just to help me avoid grinding right through that really thin surface. I can tell just by looking at the edge that there's no seam on this bottom piece where there would be a layer of veneer, so that means it's solid wood. I just don't know if it's anything fancy or worth stripping. Nope, looks like plain old pine that had that same almost opaque dark finish on it from the factory. And now I can see from the inside of the drawer panels that these frames are maple and the inlaid panels are maple plywood. So I'm just going to go over the rest with the same grit. I don't need to remove all of the old paint because it's adhered well. I just want to smooth it out. The brush strokes, any dents or dings either in the paint or that were in the wood before it got painted. It's never going to be perfect. It's always going to have some little character marks, but I'll get it as smooth and tidy as I can. I've just plopped an old towel down on the rough garage floor so that I can roll this over and sand the other side without causing any new damage. Okay, this is where we're at. The top is good, not perfect. There are a few scratches that I just don't want to sand any further or even try and steam out with my iron because I don't want to risk causing any new damage. And I imagine that these cracked spots have probably been in the veneer since it was first applied and were just covered over by the darker finish. Like I said, they're character marks. It's almost antique after all. I'm going to pick up any of the fine sanding dust still kicking around with a microfiber cloth. I did find a couple more spots on the drawers that need gluing, and then I'm going to spray all of the mahogany with a few coats of this vinyl sealer. It'll bring out the natural color and act as a primer for the new lacquered finish that I'm planning to use on here. But for now, I mostly just wanted to, well, seal up the porous wood grain and protect it while I work on painting the rest. These soft pine pieces are filled with little pock marks, so I'm going to do a quick skim coat of wood filler over them that I can sand smooth once it's dry. And I also found a big chunk out of the back leg that needs some too. I think we're finally ready to start moving into refinishing now. I'm going to mask off all of the good wood with some delicate grip painter's tape to protect it from primer and paint, and hopefully, since it's not super sticky, it won't pull up any wood fibers when it's time to take it off. This frog tape is my go-to for really crisp lines because it has a cool paint block technology that's a polymer in the adhesive on the tape, and it reacts with water to form a micro barrier that seals down the edges of the tape and prevents anything from bleeding underneath. Usually the water content in your paint is enough to activate that seal, but I'm gonna just quickly burnish down all the edges with a damp cloth to make sure I'm good. I usually use my bright white bin shellac base primer, but I want to make life a tiny bit easier today, so I'm going to use this spray can of just clear shellac instead. It will block in any tannins in the wood from bleeding through, which is part of why the original paint had a bit of a dirty look to it. And it's going to seal up the porous filler spots so that my new paint has a nice even base to sit on top of. I think one coat of this should be enough, but I'm going to let it fully dry for a few hours before I start to paint. As soon as I saw the mahogany, I knew I wanted to use this dark chocolate brown paint from my cabinet from Fusion Mineral Paint on the rest of the piece. This is an acrylic resin paint that's made specifically for furniture surfaces. It makes a super strong bond to most surfaces all by itself. It's UV and water resistant, and it's low VOC, so it's really great to use inside with a brush or roller if you don't have a separate shop to work in. I try to remember to always filter my paints into my sprayer just to catch any clumps of dried paint or chunks of pigment. Sometimes I add a few tablespoons of water to Fusion, but this color is already the right consistency to spray, so I was just gonna go for it. Two light coats of this should be enough to get full coverage over this patchy looking desk, and this paint needs about 2 hours to dry in between coats. So once the first layer is dry, I'll pop back out, give it all a quick rub down with a fine grit sandpaper for one last chance to smooth things down, spray on my second coat, and leave it all to dry overnight. Fusion is really durable all on its own, but because I imagine this is going to be a really high traffic piece with feet kicking around the insides, vacuums banging into the legs, and lots of wiping off if it gets used for makeup, I want to add a few more layers of a satin polyurethane just as insurance. I am going to stir in a little drop of chocolate paint to tint this though, which really helps with preventing the poly from drying streaky or hazy looking, which is a pretty common problem when you're using it over dark or saturated colors like this. Again, through a paint filter into my cleaned out gun. I'll adjust my flow settings too because this is a lot thinner than the paint was and I don't want too much product coming out. And then I can spray on 2 coats of this as well, waiting the same 2 hours in between. Poly is dry. Now I have to finish all the wood bits. I'm going to move all of my masking over to cover the paint now because I'm going to be using some lacquer products on the mahogany, and from personal experience, I know that lacquer can sometimes cause water-based products to crackle, and that is not the look I'm going for here. Actually, I think I should put some plastic around this too, just to keep any overspray off the fresh paint. This is toner, which is a spray-on color that is going to deepen and richen the wood, kind of like a stain would do, but it's going to sit on top of that vinyl sealer layer instead of soaking down into the actual wood fibers. This stuff is very high VOC, unlike the paint was, so it's super stinky, and you absolutely have to wear a vapor filtering respirator and work in the most well-ventilated space you can. It can also be a little bit tricky to use because it goes from not looking like it's doing anything at all and the color not changing much to, oh no, what have I done? Dark or even drippy really fast. So super light misting coats a little bit at a time until you build up a color that you're happy with. Look at my cute little old lady shuffle back and forth trying to keep the spray consistent. Now that the toner's dry, I'm going to give it a layer of the clear satin lacquer that I'll be finishing this with to seal it in before I go in with my little furniture touch-up paint kit to try and camouflage the damaged filled spots and those holes on the drawer fronts. This should be dry enough for that in about 30 minutes. This little touch-up kit has seriously changed the game for me, and refinishing veneered pieces like this. These little tubes of different wood-toned resin fillers are so easy to mix together and layer over each other with a little brush to help hide flaws like the darker nicks and dents or corners of the edges with blown through veneer. I like to make myself a little palette with a few different shades that I can see in my piece, and then just keep layering until the flaws kind of disappear. I mean, they'll never be perfect, and when your nose is pressed right up against the surface, you can always find them, but from a regular furniture viewing distance, you can get a lot to go away. I'm going to spray on a few more coats of lacquer right over top to build up a nice thick protective layer. Lacquer is so nice because each layer dries really fast and just melts into the last one, so you don't need to sand it in between coats, but you can go over it with a fine 400 grit or higher if you end up with any dust or lint fluffies stuck in it. All this masking can go now, and hopefully I don't need to do any touch-ups, but other than that, this makeover is done. Time to go back to the beginning for a reminder of how this once well-loved piece of furniture first arrived in my shop. I'm sure it was cared for and appreciated for many years in its original finish, and probably painted later on as a way to extend its life after plenty of wear and tear before it eventually got tucked away in the shed. Now it's completely refreshed and ready to shine again. The mahogany grain on the top and drawers still tells a story of a life well lived, but this almost antique vanity is just waiting for someone new to take it home and love it again. Thank you so much for hanging out with me while I worked my way through this one. Don't forget to leave me a thumbs up and comment to let me know what you think of this one, and I will catch you all next time.